Our gospel today comes right after the infancy narrative of Jesus. And it's easy to wonder why we have this 30-year gap, this 30-year wait by both Jesus and John the Baptist before they began their work of preaching and teaching. However, the old law stated that you could not function as a priest until you were 30 years old. Being only 28 myself, this is one more reason why I'm very happy that we have a new law, right up there with bacon. But John the Baptist is very important to the mission of Jesus. John is the new Elijah, preparing the way for the Messiah. But John himself didn't recognize that role right away. That is why in the 7th chapter of Luke, John sends his followers to ask if Jesus is the Messiah. And Jesus sends them back not only saying that yes, he is the one for whom they have been waiting, but that John isn't your average prophet. He is the one who was foretold would prepare the way of the Lord. So we should be especially alert in our gospel today, where John is particularly harsh towards the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He calls them a brood of vipers. And we know that this criticism often wasn't unwarranted. The Pharisees and the Sadducees loved to hold up their position as children of Abraham. In other words, they looked down on the rest of the nations because they knew that they were God's chosen people. But John the Baptist wasn't about to take any of their attitude today. He cuts off their prideful argument when he says, "And do not presume to say to yourselves, 'We have Abraham as our father,' for I tell you, God can raise up children to Abraham from these stones." He won't let them hold up that admittedly special relationship without also acknowledging the responsibilities that come with it. And then John uses an image that Christ will use just 4 chapters after today's gospel. The image of plants or trees who bear fruit that is either good or bad. And he has a similar warning as Christ. His winnowing fan is in his hand. He will clear the threshing floor and gather his wheat into his barn, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. This imagery seems very serious and a little frightening, but we should draw hope from St. Paul's letter to the Romans today. Paul says that the Scriptures should provide us with encouragement, and that these things were written so that we might have hope. But why should these frightening images fill us with hope? Because it has happened before. Our responsorial psalm comes from Psalm 72, and we believe that this psalm was written by King Solomon to be used at the coronation of his son, Rehoboam. The psalm is very beautiful, and I think it's worth listening to a few of the lines as if it were written from a father to his son on the day that he is crowned king. Justice shall flourish in his time, and fullness of peace forever. May he rule from sea to sea. He shall have pity for the lowly and the poor. May his name be blessed forever. It's a beautiful prayer, but it was not to be. Rehoboam's rule resulted in a civil war, which divided the kingdom into north and south, and which would eventually lead to the entire kingdom being conquered. It seems ironic and heartbreaking to dwell on until we look back at our first reading from Isaiah. Isaiah gives the Israelites a new source of hope. He said that they would one day have a king who would embody justice and righteousness in a way that they could not even imagine, beyond even what Solomon hoped for his son. This king wasn't just going to be a great earthly leader, but his reign would mean the end of all conflict, of all brokenness in creation itself. And that this king would be a shoot that shall sprout, tongue twister, that shall sprout from the stump of Jesse. Jesse was David's father, and Isaiah was saying that the kingdom of Israel, which had fallen into ruins, would be restored in an unimaginable way. We can look back with perfect hindsight and see that, of course, Jesus Christ was the fulfillment of this promise. Not only was he of the line of David, but his foster father, Joseph, himself had a father named Jesse. Isaiah saw an Israel that had been cut down by an axe, the fate about which John warns the Pharisees and Sadducees. Israel's repeated sinfulness led to their ruin. And Isaiah promises that despite all the sorrow and loss, it will be Israel that God will raise back up again with new growth, new life. When all seemed lost, a new shoot from the old, a new shoot from the supposedly dead stump of Jesse. According to some, the second candle of our Advent wreath represents faith. And it is a great week to remember that even when everything seems broken and hopeless in our lives, whether it is our own mistakes that have torn us down, or if it is a force beyond our control, that there is still cause for faith. Because if God breathed life back into the broken nation of Israel, and through them into the broken human race, he can breathe life and hope back into the brokenness of our lives as well.